First of all, welcome everyone. Welcome to the Office of Attorney General, and hope everyone had a wonderful Labor Day weekend. I don't know if September is the first month of fall or the last month of summer. Today, I think it's the last month of summer. It's hot out there. Yeah, just a little bit. Welcome to it's the inaugural meeting of the Maryland Commission on Hate Crime Response and Prevention. For short, I call it the Hate Crimes Commission. I would like to just change the agenda slightly by moving that second item to the first, and we can start with introductions, and then I'll offer some brief welcoming remarks, and then we'll begin with we'll continue with the rest of the agenda. So, with that, I'm Anthony Brown, and I am the 47th Attorney General of the state of Maryland. 3 days ago was my 8th month anniversary on the job, and it's an exciting opportunity for me to work with extraordinary professionals who are doing big things on behalf of the people of Maryland. So with that, why don't we go, we'll go counterclockwise, and we'll start here, work our way around, and then see who's who.
Thanks, sir. I'm David Engel. I'm the Director of the Maryland Coordination and Analysis Center.
Good morning. I'm Kate Bryan. I'm the Executive Director of the Maryland Center for School Safety. Good morning.
Meredith Weisel with the Anti-Defamation League. I'm the Regional Director that oversees Maryland, DC, Virginia, and North Carolina, but I live here in Maryland as well.
Cleveland Horton, Deputy Director for the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights.
Good morning, everyone. Yolanda Sonier. I'm the Administrator for the Howard County Office of Human Rights and Equity, but representing the Maryland Association of Human Rights Agencies.
Good morning. My name is Sam Williamson. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm an attorney with Disability Rights Maryland.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Larry Bell. I'm the Deputy Chief of Police at the Towson University Police Department.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Pat Jones. I'm Executive Director of the Immigration Outreach Service Center.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Zane Joby. I'm the Director of the Council on American Islamic Relations, Maryland office.
Good morning, everybody. I'm a community organizer with the Sikh Coalition in Maryland.
Hi, I'm Sarah Mirsky-McGee-Sheeher, Deputy Director of the Baltimore Jewish Council.
Good morning. My name is Lori Ruth Sheeher. I'm the Legal Director of the Women's Law Center in Maryland.
Good morning. My name is Lala Shi. I'm the Chair of Howard County Asian American Pacific Islander Commission.
Good morning. I'm Deborah Miller, the Maryland Director of Government and Community Relations for the JCRC of Greater Washington, a bit of a mouthful, the Jewish Community Relations Council of Greater Washington. Nice to see you.
Just getting here, give me a second. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ramona Brown Carter with Coalition Opposing Violence and Extremism, serving as one of the chairs, and happy to be here with everyone.
Good morning, everybody. Daryl McSwain, Police Chief with Maryland National Guard Park Police in Montgomery County, and representing the Maryland Chiefs of Police Association.
Good morning. I'm Everett Seska. I'm the Sheriff of Anne Arundel County, and I'm representing the Maryland Sheriff's Association.
Good morning. I'm Stephen Crow, the Executive Director of the Maryland State's Attorneys Association and State's Attorney Coordinator for Maryland.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Jennifer Frederick. I am the new Assistant Attorney General that is working with the Commission.
Good morning. I'm Peter Burns. I'm the General Counsel to the Office of the Attorney General.
Great. Well, welcome everyone, and as we can see, we've got quite a diversity of perspectives and views. We're diverse by geography and in so many ways, and I'm really excited about the composition of the commission and what it means for the work that we're going to do going forward. I was just going to ask, but someone anticipated that tick, 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 is that going for good or? Yeah, whew, that was distracting. So, look, first of all, I want to thank each of you again for being here as commissioners on this newly formed commission of the Hate Crime Response and Prevention Commission. And the standing up of the commission has been, or is the result, I think, of a number of years of hard work and effort, work that most, if not all of you, have been involved in over the years. I'm new to the work, but certainly the goals and the objectives that we're trying to accomplish and promote here are not foreign to me. So I'm just honored to be a part of this group and to be able to chair the commission. I've got some background information. I know that this is not new to any of you, but we are at an historic moment, I think, in Maryland. In 2016, we saw a dramatic rise in incidents of hate crimes and hate bias incidents across the country. Maryland was no exception. Like many states, we continue to see the number of incidences and crimes rise each year. At the state level, a 2021 hate bias report noted a few things. There were 31 arrests that were made in verified hate bias incidences or hate crimes in that year, and that was a 35% increase in arrests from the year before, and almost double the number of arrests that were made in 2019. And although state law requires law enforcement to report hate crimes and bias incidents, the fact is that many of these go unreported. So the numbers are considerably higher than what's being reported. A 2021 report by the Bureau of Justice statistics found that between 2015 and 2019, over 40% of violent hate crime incidents in Maryland went unreported to law enforcement. We know our communities are experiencing hate crime activity. We hear about it, we read about it, we observe that, and it's happening at even higher rates than what was reflected in the data. And that's why you all are acting in the way that you have in your respective organizations and efforts, and that's why we're formalizing and stepping up the work of this commission. So I've now been Attorney General, as I mentioned, for 8 months, but I'm very proud of the work that the OAG, the Office of Attorney General, has been doing in this space during the years before I arrived. So I'm not counting anything that I've done or patting my own back because I just got here. But I do want to acknowledge the work that the office has been doing. In 2016, we launched the Hate Crimes Hotline, and that's a mechanism that allows Marylanders to report hate crimes and hate bias incidents to our office so that we can refer them to the best resources that we believe are available to address these issues. In 2019, we started an informal AG Hate Crimes Task Force. So this is sort of like that Task Force 2.0. That's what we are today. And many of you were part of that task force and helped brainstorm strategies for combating hate crimes. And with your urging and input, and I encourage you to continue to be have that sense of urgency, we developed the hate crimes guidance documents that help educate the public on the difference between hate crimes and bias incidents. We know that education is key. In 2021, we expand our efforts to combat hate crimes when the Office of the Attorney General received the DOJ Bureau of Justice Grant Award. And that grant helped fund an Assistant Attorney General who has introduced themselves today to support the work of this commission. And in partnership with the Maryland State Police, the grant will also allow us to provide increased training to law enforcement and prosecutors on how to identify and investigate hate crime activity. This DOJ grant is also supporting a series of regional hate bias forums across the state that we are hosting in partnership with the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights. I had the privilege of attending, I think, the inaugural, the kickoff one in Western Maryland earlier this year. And if you have not been, we certainly will invite commissioners to attend and participate in those regional forums. And it brings together not only the public, but along with, as I mentioned, the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights and local agencies to bring together community leaders, law enforcement, and constituents to discuss ways to combat hate crimes in their region. Our next forum is going to take place, mark your calendar, September 18th and 19th, with a focus on Howard, Montgomery, and Prince George's counties. I don't know if we have a location for that as yet.
Montgomery College.
Montgomery College. Germantown. Okay, great. And so we'll make sure everyone has that information if you don't already have it. And I certainly look forward to continue to meet with communities around the state to address these issues. The lessons we learned from the forums help us reassess and recalibrate how we develop strategies and policies within state agencies and communities to come up with the best ways to address acts of hate. Still, we needed a long-term solution to address hate crimes at the state level, and that came with the signing of House Bill 1066, and most, if not all of you, followed that this past legislative session, which created this Commission on Hate Crime Response and Prevention. And we're tasked with evaluating state laws and policies on hate crimes and develop strategies to address these crimes. The Commission, that's us, will submit annual reports to the General Assembly and to the Maryland State Department of Education. Those reports begin at the end of next year, and the report is mandated to include recommendations on policy, as a minimum, policy and legislative changes that are necessary to tackle hate crimes. And I'm almost certain that it will comment on budget requirements as well in that report. So we have hired an Assistant Attorney General, and again, Jennifer Frederick, who has already introduced themselves, is dedicated full-time to the Commission. We're excited about that, and we'll be really, handling our offices here in the OHG, our response to hate crime activity. I also want to thank Anita Hurley and Tiffany Diamo, as well as Andrew Lee, who are in our newly created Office of Equity, Policy, and Engagement. And I want to thank them for their work doing not only support the work of this commission, but the broader efforts around policy that is focused on equity. And stay tuned, because next month we're going to make a major announcement about a new strategic initiative. I didn't say more than I should have, did I? Okay, at least we got a mark. Okay, now look out. So come the end of October, if there's no announcement, then you need to say, hey, what happened to the announcement? So now we got to get it done. Right. I applaud you, the stakeholders, and members of the public in attendance today for your unwavering commitment to support our joint efforts to eradicate hate throughout Maryland. Hate crimes remain a threat to our communities, our schools, our neighborhoods, and certainly the recent shooting in Jacksonville, Florida, where 3 black men were gunned down, is a tragic reminder of the urgency of our work. So we have to press on, press harder. I call upon each of us in our leadership roles to continue that work. The more that we understand how pervasive these acts are, I think the better we will be in a position to address them to create a better today and tomorrow for all Marylanders. So that's sort of my opening remarks. And again, I thank everyone for being here. And with that, you have the agenda in front of you. We'll follow closely on the agenda. Let's see how close. 10:17. Wow, only 2 minutes over. That's not bad. That's not bad. Thanks for your brief introduction. That's what kept us on time. And with that, let me turn it over to Dave Engel, who's going to provide an overview of hate, bias, and climate in Maryland.
Thanks, sir. I appreciate it. So what I figured I would do is kind of talk about the legislation, where we're at, historical, bring that into 21, 22, and then touching on 2023. Because I think it's relevant, and back to the Attorney General's point, it shows where our numbers are starting to creep up where they were historically 20 years ago. So Public Safety Article 2307 is really kind of defining public article for law enforcement and how we collect and report hate bias incidents in Maryland. The safety article requires law enforcement and the Office of State Fire Marshal to report incidents of bias and hate crimes that are reported to them. That is the information that we analyze. Back to the Attorney General's point, we know there are incidents that are not reported to law enforcement that we're not seeing. So those numbers are higher than the numbers that we actually are looking at. But there's enough information that we collect to realize that the numbers are trending in the wrong direction. So 2307 basically it requires reporting on incidents seemingly directed at an individual or a group based on their race, ethnicity, ancestry, religion, sexual orientation, disability, gender identity, or homelessness. Changes to the law in 2012 added homelessness as a protected category. In 2015, gender and gender identity were added. These numbers These categories have not significantly changed the amount of reporting that we've seen over the years, and I'll explain some of that. The report that the Maryland State Police, in conjunction with the Maryland Coordination and Analysis Center, are required to submit to the General Assembly is October 1st of each year. So that report for this year will be coming out in the next 2 weeks. So I can give some preliminary data on that, and our numbers are up significantly from 2021. But again, this report will be public. It's a public report. It's on the Maryland State Police website. It's on the MCAC website on October 1st. Everyone can see it, including the public. So when we look at how incidents are reported, there's 3 categories of reporting. Verified. Verified means that law enforcement conducted an investigation and there is enough evidence to say that this incident occurred and there is a biased motivation behind it. Inconclusive evidence is conflicting or there's not sure, so it's an inconclusive category. And then unfounded. Unfounded means law enforcement conducted an investigation and determined that there was no biased motivation behind the incident. A majority are usually in the inconclusive area because a lot of what we see happens overnight and people are reporting it the next day. So a lot of time there's no suspect identity in this, and that's really why those numbers are low, because it's very tough. You'll see graffiti overnight at a building and the follow-up investigation, things along those lines. So historically, what I'll say to put this into context, we're not at the numbers we were in the 90s and the early 2000s. And for law enforcement that's been around for years, they know the 80s and 90s was really, we were up around 1,200 to 1,500 annually there. And then going up into the 2000s, those numbers started to come down. About 700 was the highest in the early 2000s. But over the last decade, what we've seen when we went down from a low of 155, those numbers are coming back up, and they're coming back up sharply. So in 2021, it was actually 465 reported incidents, up from 388 the year prior. We're on pace for 2023 for those numbers to be higher than 465. So to put that in, to bring that into context with the 2021 report, anti-Black or anti-African American bias has historically always been by far the highest reported bias motivation for Maryland reporting. That's followed by anti-Jewish and anti-gay male historically. And that very rarely does that change. We are seeing some stuff in 2023 that's really changing some of the landscape on that, and I can explain that in a later meeting. So if we go into the 2021 reporting, the important thing for people that review the report is an incident can have multiple bias motivations, and that is important. So Maryland law requires the reporting of hate crimes and bias incidents. A bias incident isn't necessarily a criminal act. It is literally a fight. A good example would be as a white male, I get an argument with an African American male and an Asian male, and I'm throwing out derogatory comments to them. That's one incident with 2 different biases. So when we're looking at that reporting, the bias motivation is always usually higher than the actual incident total. 1 incident, 2 biases. So when you're looking at the reporting, that kind of explains some of these numbers. So again, in 2021, we saw reporting go from 388 up from 382. So that number went up. And then for 2022, again, the number has gone up to 465. 16 of 24 counties reported a hate bias incident in Maryland. So 8 counties reported nothing. And that is very, very where we focus on the criticality of the training that's being done right now to explain to first responders and the public the importance of reporting this. So I think all of us in this room can say, do we really believe that there was not a single incident in 8 jurisdictions in Maryland? So it's really something that I think the commission can have some good conversations around. Race, ethnicity, and ancestry as a category accounted for almost 69% of the bias motivations, with 276 out of 402 reported in 2021. Again, as I said before, anti-Black or anti-African American has always been the highest. That was followed last year by anti-Jewish and then anti-sexual orientation. In 2021, again, sexual orientation related bias motivations were the second most, which is interesting from an anomaly because usually it's anti-Jewish, but we know going into the 2022 report that's changed and anti-Jewish is going to be second again. If we look at anti-Asian incidents, anti-Asians went up significantly, and anti-Latino or Hispanic incidents rose in 2021 as well. Anti-Asian incidents went from 4 to 33, and anti-Hispanic went from 3 to 19. While that is relatively low in overall reporting, there's still a significant increase in incidents motivated by or targeting those specific groups. So in 2021, the most reported incidents or locations where we had a bias or a hate crime were at a residence or a house. That has historically been that way, followed by a highway or a roadway with 80. So it was 100 reported on a road or a highway, 80 reported at 100 at a house, 80 at a highway, and then secondary schools followed up with 36. So that number with secondary schools is also a focus, and my colleague Kate and I talk about this. Pre-COVID, the numbers were very high. They accounted for about 30% of reporting between secondary schools, elementary, secondary, and higher education. Through COVID, those numbers came down. New school year, everybody back in school, the numbers are starting to rise again. So that's something that we look at. As the Attorney General mentioned, 31 arrests were made in 2021. So we pull that and we come into 2022. And when we look at 2022, again, our numbers have gone up. 15 counties reported in 2022, so we're down a county. So now 9 of 24 jurisdictions did not report a hate crime. Historically, that's been about the same. We've gone between 14 to 18 historically over the last several decades in reporting. So I think there's always room for improvement there. As with 2021, race, ethnicity, and ancestry was the highest reported bias motivation. Anti-Black, again, was the highest reported bias motivation for 2021. Anti-religion incidents went up significantly in 2021 compared to the previous year. And anti-Jewish bias, specific bias motivations went up significantly, up to 77 specific to anti-Jewish incidents. And anti-sexual oriented bias motivations incidents also rose, but not to the levels of anti-Jewish. In 2022, the most reported incidents by location were, again, we're at a residence or a house, same number, 100, but followed by schools or secondary at 90. So you can see during COVID, the number was down. Coming out of COVID, kids going back into school, that number is going up, and we anticipate that's going to continue to occur. And then it's followed by a highway or a roadway with 71. Weapons in 2021 were reported in 80 incidents. Weapons in 2022 were reported in 80 incidents. And most of that is personal weapons, so it's not like a gun, it's like a bat or some type of other weapon that somebody would use. But that's significant. 80 reported incidents with some type of weapon being alleged or actually being used. Taking from 2022 into 2023, very preliminary again, we know that our numbers are on at a level that we're seeing that are going back 20 years very preliminarily. And that is concerning because, again, we've seen that cycle from the early 2000s up, and we're on pace to be back where we were 20 years ago. So there's a lot of work to be done, and I think the education and outreach is critical. I think this commission is going to play a big part in some of that. But again, educating the public and reporting requirements, educating law enforcement and how to respond are two of the most important things that we're looking at. The 2021 report, again, will be posted on October 1st, the public document. All the reporting behind that for over the last decade is on the Maryland State Police website. So you can personally go in there, all that information is online. The other thing we would ask the commission is, if there are areas of these incidents that we really aren't analyzing that could be more beneficial, let us know. The important thing behind this is to protect the identity of the victim. We're not looking at personal identifying information of the victim. We don't want that out because it becomes a public document. So the stuff we're looking at is race, age, sexual orientation, things along those lines, religion. That's really what we're analyzing because we want to protect the identity of the victim here. But if there's stuff when you look at the report that we could do better at, please reach out to us, let us know. Reach out to the Attorney General's staff or the Commission on Civil Rights. We work very closely with Cleveland and his team on the report. There's also an individual county synopsis in there. And for our folks that are a part of the human rights groups from each of the jurisdictions, you can go right in there and pick out your own profile for your own county and it's based on law enforcement reporting by the individual agency. The reason we did that, changing that in the report, is to promote accountability in that agency. That chief or sheriff explained why they reported 0, instead of us having to explain why their agency didn't report anything. So historically, it was based on county. Now it's the county, but also all the individual reporting inside of it. 4 jurisdictions drive a majority of hate crimes reporting in Maryland: Montgomery, Howard, Anne Arundel, and Baltimore County. Part of that is because they're very good and very aggressive with their reporting. So again, I think working with the chiefs and sheriffs associations and others and do this training, the idea would be to promote accountability with everyone else to kind of step up and look at similar reporting. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, sir.
Great, wonderful. I know later we have discussion and Q&A, but before we go to commission background and overview, and I'm not sure who's leading that. Okay, thank you very much, Tiffany. Maybe if there are any, maybe we'll take 1 or 2 questions for Dave. Are there any that folks want to ask at this point?
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
You talked about using weapons and things, but do we break it down like each year to say, okay, all hate crimes need to be addressed, but we have this much vandalism going on this year in this particular county, but we noticed that actual violence against a person has increased by this much. I'm just curious.
So the report has like the highest motivation for crime type. So again, that's based on, just so you guys know, it's based on uniform crime reporting through the FBI. So Maryland's crime book has to also have codes in there that are non-criminal because of the bias incidents. So historically, ours is like an intimidation that doesn't reach the level of crime. It's me writing a letter saying, hey, sheriff, you're an N, you shouldn't be in the job. While it's not criminal, it's still a bias incident. So that's our highest, but that is all broken down in the report. So you can see, target based on race, based on crime type and things along those lines in the reporting.
Anybody else? We have time for one more, and then we can always come. You're saying for the entire?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else? Okay, great.
I have a question.
Oh yeah, sure.
So is there any kind of incentive to encourage reporting from law enforcement? So for example, some kind of structure or system in place to promote and encourage law enforcement to report these crimes?
So incentive-wise, are you talking about like a reward or something?
A reward or some kind of I'm just thinking outside the box, because I know underreporting is a big struggle for a lot of our communities. And with law enforcement, unfortunately, because there is a historically tense relationship between many communities and law enforcement, if there's some mechanism in place to encourage reporting, that might help to encourage more law enforcement to report these incidents as they happen.
I think back to the Attorney General's opening comments, I really do think the training portion of this is going to be critical. There's 16,000 police officers in Maryland, and a lot of them are new. We always have that rotation, so as that training comes out and it's mandated to the Maryland Police Training Commission, that's all stuff that officers are going to be taught that they have to do. And I think honestly, like short term, that's one, but then there's always other potential areas of growth there. But I really do think that the training is probably the single most important thing there is for law enforcement to better report.
And let me also just add to that this is one of the roles and functions that we have. If we think there are other strategies, we know just looking at our on the hotline that there are, at least to me, a surprisingly high percentage of those calls that involve law enforcement, right? And bias incidents, if not crimes, by law enforcement. So, these are the kinds of things that we're going to have to wade through, think through, work through, and not only going after the underlying incidents, but if there's a disconnect between reporting because there are biases within an agency, then we've got to work through some strategies on how to address that as well.
I think one of the things that Dave did mention that's been good is the accountability piece, right? Outside of just exactly the opposite of being an incentive, just holding those jurisdictions who aren't reporting accountable to ensuring that they are reporting, and the reasons behind why they're not reporting is also going to be beneficial in getting people to ensure that they are reporting accurate or any numbers in those jurisdictions that are historically not reporting hate bias incidents.
Tiffany.
Thank you, AG Brown. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Wonderful. Hi, my name is Tiffany Diego. I know most of you met me via email or a Teams meeting. I'm an Assistant Attorney General here in the Executive Division in our Office of Ethics Policy Engagement, and I will be reviewing with you all the background of the Commission in just a minute. So we talked a little bit about this, but just to give a background for the general public and some stakeholders who are here with us, let's just go into what is exactly a hate crime versus.
Can I just jump in real quick?
Sure.
I apologize. The reason why both Tiffany and I made references to the general public, and we probably should have let you know at the outset, this is being live streamed, right? Right, so I don't know if everyone was aware of that, but I think it's good practice to let folks know that there's an audience beyond this room.
Thank you, AG. So a hate crime is a crime including a threat to commit a crime committed because of another person or a group's perceived personal characteristic or group membership, as Mr. Dave Hinkle mentioned. A hate bias incident is any act or expression of hostility or aggression that is motivated by bias against a specific class, but does not necessarily constitute a crime under state or federal law. Both incidents, both types of hate crimes and bias incidents are required to be reported if law enforcement receives one officially. So just a background of our overview, we talked about it a little bit in the AG's opening remarks, but our response to hate crimes has been long and culminated, of course, at the beginning of this beautiful commission. In 2016, we created the hate crime hotline. We mainly use it for Marylanders to report their hate crime and hate bias incident inquiries or allegations, and we provide referral services. So we may say you may contact Maryland State Police, the State's Attorney's Office in your county, possibly an organization that may help them, Police Accountability Board, just depends on the type of incident or allegation that they're making. In 2020, we issued guidance on reporting a hate crime or how to report a hate bias incident. In November 2021, we successfully pursued and received a DOJ grant, which launched our 3-year effort. That grant is more than $800,000 to combat increased hate crime activity and bias incidents in Maryland in the following ways. First, we enhanced community-based partnerships through our former AG Hate Crimes Task Force, which is now formalized in this codified commission. Many of you were part of that. We provide law enforcement training. We also are in the process of developing a hate bias and hate crime web portal. So instead of only the hotline, people will be able to formally write in reports and be able to let us know of their inquiries. This portal will also hold calendar events you can see when the commission is meeting, any updates that the AG's office and the AG are doing in the community with respect to hate crimes and hate bias incidents. And actually, even today, before the AG leaves, we would love to get a photo of all the commissioners and you all so that we can put it on this lovely website that we're developing. And we're hoping to have it underway in the coming months. So that is what we're currently focusing on. We also are doing regional hate bias forums. Like the AG mentioned, we had our Western Maryland Forum in May, and that was a success. We're currently planning very closely with MCCR and Howard County, Montgomery County, Prince George's County's human rights agencies, and other stakeholders to have a forum mainly open to the public on day 2, which is September 19th, but a law enforcement focused day on September 18th. And that will be in Montgomery College, Germantown. So now we're here, the commission, right? So like we said, HB 1066 codified the hate crimes, AG Hate Crimes Task Force into the commission. This commission is now tasked with evaluating state laws and policies on hate crimes and bias incidents and developing strategies on how to prevent and address them. And like we said, reports will be submitted by this commission annually beginning on December 1st, 2024. So we have a little bit of time to the Maryland State Assembly and the Maryland State Department of Education and the Maryland General Assembly. So one of the really important things where we can dive into this work is the formation of subcommittees. We'll have Jennifer Frederick, our AAG on hate crimes for this commission, delve more into that later. But here are some examples of what we propose we could dive into. Of course, we are open to the commissioner's perspective, so it's not limited to this. But like schools and education settings, we've been seeing a lot of incidents in those areas. crimes in those areas. Homeless populations, of course, they are a protected class under the law, but we really want to focus on that population to provide some greater representation on this commission. Community engagement reporting, right? So how do we improve those relationships to ensure that incidents and possibly crimes of hate are documented accurately and reported? And then just reevaluating our current state laws. Is there anything that we could do more? Is there something we haven't evaluated yet that this commission can contribute to strengthen our laws on hate crimes and bias incidents? So you all, right? So just an overview of membership just for our general public. These are our large groups of members that are represented on this commission. So of course, law enforcement, groups representing racially marginalized people and ethnicities, 2 members of the general public that were designated by the AG. Those are Disability Rights Maryland and Towson University. Groups representing the LGBTQ+ communities, the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights, human rights groups, groups representing immigrant communities, as well as religious groups. So these are just our resources. Again, we mentioned them. Of course, we have our OAG Hate Crimes Hotline as a referral source for all Marylanders. Our Maryland Commission on Hate Crime Response and Prevention. This is our civil rights inbox where people can inquire and write in as we stand up that portal and website. We also have the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights phone number here, as well as Maryland State Police. And if you have any questions, please let me know, but that is the conclusion of my presentation. Thank you.
Any questions for Tiffany?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, back here.
Are your slides available?
I can make them available. I can work with my team to see if I can make them available, yes.
Yeah, we'll definitely get that. And in fact, we can just shoot them out to all the everyone on the contact list, like all the commissioners.
Sure. And now we'll turn it over to Jennifer.
Cool. So what I'm going to go through and discuss some of the subcommittees that we suggested, a little bit of the reasoning behind that, and then open up the floor for the commissioners to talk about not only responding to the suggested subcommittees, to suggest your own, and also to ask any questions you may have. So for the subcommittees, the first one we suggested was on addressing hate bias in school and education settings. As Dave Engel mentioned earlier, that tends to be a historically high place where hate crimes can occur, as well as the fact that it's continuing to rise. But even while schools were mostly shut down at the beginning of the pandemic, we still saw that that was a really high location for where hate crimes are occurring. It's also a great place to start education efforts. Considering the fact that we are talking to young people, whether it be K through 12 or in higher education, that is a great way to start making sure that people are aware not only of what the laws are, but what they can do if something were to occur to them. And it would help to provide recommendations in the future on how we can address hate crimes in schools and hopefully have a long-term positive response in setting up young Marylanders for knowing their rights and knowing their resources. We also suggested having a subcommittee around homeless populations. While we have a number of wonderful groups around this table that are able to provide reference to other to communities in Maryland, we don't currently have a member representing the homeless population. And that is a group that not only is included within the statute, but is also a group that is most likely to have issues reporting. Whether that be finding a place to make a phone call to talk about the sensitive nature of a hate crime occurring, but also having the resources to understand where they can take that report, or even that they're protected, considering that is one of the newer groups in the statute, would help in, the subcommittee would be able to help encourage awareness, as well as potentially address any underreporting we may be seeing. For community engagement and reporting, this is a little bit of a broader section, and I could see where the commission might want to split it out into more than one subcommittee, but helping to address and recommend where legislation could be helpful or funding aimed at bolstering community trust. As we've already mentioned, there is sometimes an issue where people don't feel comfortable reporting to the police. And we have seen that within the hotline. We've also seen where finding ways to help train the police so that they can continue to bolster trust as well, and giving them the resources that they need to do so would be incredibly helpful. As we mentioned, this providing training for law enforcement, and then it could also address potentially fostering community engagement through smaller roundtables and festivals on a smaller level and neighborhood and county levels to help create that bond within the community with their law enforcement officials. And finally, we suggested a committee on looking at current state laws. So that would be looking to what Maryland already has on the books, and then the commission can address where they think there could be improvements, and also looking on a broader level. What does the rest of the country do? What are other hate crime laws across the country that are trying to address the same issue? We are not the only ones that have made steps to do better, and addressing and looking to what similarly situated states around the country are doing would be a good way for that subcommittee to use their time. So I would love for some feedback from the commissioners if you have ideas on these or any other potential subcommittees or any questions.
You know, I was thinking, you said the homeless population, we don't have somebody from that, but could we possibly look at maybe other organizations that work with homeless people? They have, you know, the knowledge. So.
I think for the homeless population, the Department of Veterans Affairs has a lot of ties and resources in connecting with the homeless population. Maybe they might have more suggestions on who might be an appropriate representative to serve on this commission.
Sorry, go ahead. I would say in like the greater Baltimore area, we have the Homeless Persons Representation Project, and then we also have healthcare for the homeless, and they also do advocacy in Annapolis as well. So there's
I was just going to make mention that in Baltimore County, my employer, we have a homeless roundtable, but we work closely with the Homelessness Alliance, and we have an equity, addressing disparities in equity committee. So it may be good to kind of connect you with that group so that we can have some communication.
So the other thing, and I'm not sure really where it fits in, but there are two things that I think we need to look at. We need to understand where social media is playing a role in a lot of this. There is a lot of things going on with online hate that is then transpiring and manifesting in person. So there are things that, you know, we can and cannot do under state law, under federal law. You know, there are a lot of organizations, including ADL, looking at this. And then the second aspect of that that's kind of tied up with social media is the gaming community. Actually, I have three things as I'm saying this. So is it within the gaming community also, because that is a place where there is a lot of recruiting, particularly with extremist activity for young white males, particularly between the ages of 14 to 17, that we need to look at, because that's not just a school issue, but that is also an issue as far as recruitment, particularly when we're talking about extremist activity, and then adding into that mental health. So that mental health is kind of a huge part of a lot of this, and we are certainly seeing aspects, and that doesn't necessarily discount the impact of a hate and bias incident, but there are certainly factors sometimes where it leads somebody, and I'm talking some major extremist activity, but not all extremist activity leads to, I think somebody asked a question about like violence and assault. Some of it is harassment of an individual that may not also rise to the level of a crime. So those are, sorry, as I was talking, I realized there were gonna be a few things. So I think that fits in a little bit of the categories, but I think we need to look at expanding some of the subcommittees. Exactly, technology related, that's probably, thank you.
Speaking of that,
I appreciate that. I'll pay you
Mr.
later.
Engel, do you have reporting on what of your incidents that were reported, of how many of them involved cyberbullying or electronic harassment type things?
So from the school side or from the state report?
Pardon?
From the school side or from the state report?
From the state report.
So there's a couple, like what we're looking at for 2022, there were a couple dozen that we know specifically was either social media or a phone call that might have originated from out of the state or something along those lines. But it is still, even though it's not as high as the overall numbers, it's still a very relevant area to look at because social media is driving a lot of this.
And ADL puts out an online hate and harassment report, and it tracks with the data that Dave mentioned before, that the highest level of harassment that we see and also what we see leading to in person is anti-Black and anti-Jewish, and then right below that is anti-LGBTQ+. And that is what has tracked the past couple of years. And we are seeing some of that play out in our school systems in particular, but we're also seeing it play out in person. And the example of Jacksonville, Florida, also just this past weekend in Florida, Nazis marched in the streets and were chanting things that they also saw on social media. So there is a correlation. So I do think it is the technology subcategory, to give Cleveland the credit for that, does need to be a part of this.
Couple things about the community engagement reporting. And I know you said some people don't feel comfortable, but some people just don't know. And I think we don't want that to get lost. If I'm called a derogatory name, my first thought isn't gonna be, I'm gonna call the police, unless it was coupled with some sort of aggression or threat or something else. But most people just don't know. And so, kind of like a whole campaign of see something, say something, but something that is relevant to, to what we're doing. The other thing is, for me, that has been important, is like we see these numbers, but like these are more than just numbers. Like these are people's lives that have been affected, and how are we, how are we reaching out to them? How are we providing resources for them to heal from what has happened to them? So, just someone calling you, I'm going about my day and I'm called a name, like that affects the whole rest of my day and the, projection of how my whole week may go. And we're collecting these numbers. And I know there was a question, and I love the question about any incentive for law enforcement, but if I report to the police, like, am I gonna leave and say, like, I reported it, but nothing happened, so what was the point of it? So for me, that's part of like the community engagement and reporting to the, bringing the community in.
To add to Yolanda's point, I think support the victims is also very important, in addition to violence prevention. And also, I would like us to consider more broadly to how to build up community resilience. I think that's also an aspect that shouldn't be ignored. Thinking about community engagement, I would also really call attention to the immigrant communities that sometimes don't have the language ability or cultural sensitivity to understand and report and know how to report. So how do we provide translations, interpretation assistance to those communities and provide the educational materials and events in a linguistically and culturally appropriate way. I think there is a lot of room to think about, to be innovative in that.
I would like to see a subcommittee on alternatives to policing. As the Attorney General mentioned, I think we see it especially with the disability community and many other marginalized communities, that there is a lot of harm that can be done by law enforcement, and I would like to see a committee that focuses on what other structures we could be creating to help address this issue.
I think also they have their hand up too.
Yeah, I don't know, dude. Sure, we do. You're in the room.
I guess I wanted to understand.
You want to introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Lee Linder, I'm the Executive Director of Trans Maryland. I use they, them pronouns, and also the policy chair for the Maryland Division on LGBTQI Merit Bus Affairs. I was wondering what the role of lived experience will be in the commission. I think, we understand that many times the only people who can get into a room are those who are professionally serving a community, but many times people share a professional and a lived experience identity, so trying to understand that component as well. And then the role of restorative justice, as we're seeking to address and ensure that we don't have ongoing and continuing incidents. What will the role of restorative justice be in addressing both the impacted person as well as the individual who has perpetrated an incident?
Yeah, I think those are great questions on how we can involve those with our subcommittees and the commission as a whole. Those are very
So, AG, excuse me, I just wanted to comment about the specific groups that are being formed and also to bring in some of the immigrant issues as well. To me, it's very important to talk about schools and educational settings. If it could be broader, more like all educational settings. If homeless could be more marginalized communities, not just homeless, but those who are facing loss of homes, those who have recently faced it, those who are in migration perhaps and seeking homes. So maybe a way of couching each of these groups so that people could speak to them from perhaps different perspectives, not just talking about homeless, but about all those who are struggling with homelessness in the state. In terms of talking about current state laws, can we talk about not just state laws, but policing that's going on across the state, particularly since we don't have everybody participating across the state? I'm just looking for ways that I can feel included as I talk about many of my folks who maybe are just come to live with us in our building and have faced homelessness for the last 5 years, but they're not technically homeless right now. And the other thing that I just want to mention is that I spent time with the 988 rollout. And to me, what was so very important about that and mental health issues was social media, as well as media that was showing 60-second clips about important people in the communities, whether they're Ravens or Orioles or whoever they might be, saying it's okay to call 988. And so I think we need to make people feel comfortable and make people feel that they can ask to address some of these issues. So just a little bit of an overview.
In the hate bias in schools education settings, I think looking at how kids are educated and thinking about potentially within legislation also different ways to potentially help with that, where it's funding for teacher trainings for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off of that, so in our conversations with the State Department of Education, it was brought to our attention that the individual LEAs are responsible for diversity training within their own respective districts, but there's no sort of oversight or no sort of metrics that each LEA is required to abide by or provide diversity training. And in fact, with our conversations with the LEAs, the local school systems, the response has always been that it's always very challenging for them to provide diversity training because there's such a wide range of perspectives on different issues related to diversity trainings, which means that the staff within the school systems are not being adequately trained. And so exploring ways that we can make sure that educators within these spaces are being provided with the tools and the trainings that they need, and maybe that could be mandated through the State Department of Education, or maybe not. Maybe it could be done through this commission or through this subcommittee, but exploring how we can increase that accountability and increase that training to staff as well. I was very shocked to hear that there's no sort of statewide requirement for school systems to provide this kind of training to educators.
Hi, my name is Ursula Franklin. I'm the Executive Associate for Dr. Cleo Inaugural with the Pride Center of Maryland. So I find all of these topics extremely interesting, and I just wanted to make sure that you all were aware of some of the efforts that we've done within the Pride Center. When it comes to addressing the hate bias in schools and providing
Can I just jump in real quick? I think let's save that for kind of like, we're gonna have a discussion, a broader discussion about what people are doing. Right now, let's focus on, if you could just focus your comments around this structure and the factors that we need to be thinking about in terms of how we structure our committees.
Understood.
That would be helpful, I think, for this part of the conversation.
Okay, no
Thanks.
problem. So still addressing the hate bias in schools, something that we've been able to find that this could be ideal with creating the structure is, yes, the schools are reaching out to us. So there isn't, a commonality. And making sure that all areas are covered to prevent those stigmas and, to prevent the bias. We've received a lot of information where it's not just the teachers, but also getting to the parents and creating like groups for the parents to support the youth and making sure that the adults are aware so it's enforced. That was one of the biggest things that I would say would be beneficial.
Just to piggyback off of that, in terms of immigrant communities that are new, that experience this kind of hate, I think the biggest vehicle they have is their kids that are in the education system. So I think that if we can have some sort of material that goes out through the education system, but is more geared towards the parents, because of the whole language barrier, the parents in immigrant communities look to their kids to understand what's going on and what resources are available. And a lot of times the kids are the ones that are putting these reports through or advising their parents on, hey, what are we allowed to do here, what's not allowed, and what is correct. I think that's a big part of that.
Hi everyone, I'm Ron Wright. I'm with the Montgomery County Anti-Hate Task Force, and I currently chair the Black and African American cohort, which is one of the things I want to bring up later. Maybe we need to think about how we address our individual demographics. But to add to the structure, I think we are compelled to do a deeper, more probative examination behind the motivations that got us here. We've been dealing with a lump under the rug, which is now Mount Kilimanjaro. So it's not only been our leadership, but our communities, but also the lack of courage to address the root causes of what's got us here. So we got to do a Michael Jackson, a kind of man in the mirror as well, from every community, figure out what have we not been addressing. This continues to be historical. If Black and African Americans continue to be the brunt of this, and we know why, and then there's, as Meredith pointed out, there's certain correlations we cannot ignore, specifically as we're in this quagmire of the 2024 election. So I would recommend that we do a deeper dive into the education of the motivations behind this. Is it retaliation? Is it historical neglect of tropes? You name it. It's just been a lot of stuff that we were uncomfortable about addressing, and it's now evident proportion. Lastly, I would just, and I could answer that question later, but I think as it's framed, and thank you for doing this, Attorney General, we're in a state of emergency. So we need to hear some immediate things we can do today. We had negative messaging in Montgomery County about kill all men-heads. Okay? That's about 5 minutes from where I live with my beautiful wife and my 3 children. I don't want it to happen to anybody else either, but we really have to think about emergency efforts as this is framed, and we wouldn't be here if these numbers were ticking up. Thank you.
I have another suggestion for an additional subcommittee that we should include, or we might want to include, related to research and data collection. Because if we don't have the accurate snapshot of the kind of challenges and the number of cases that are happening of hate bias incidents, it's going to be harder for us to get a better assessment of what the lived experiences are of communities within these spaces. So if we could have maybe some mechanism to collect data and record that information, maybe like tabulate it and present it in some sort of report to present this either within the commission or publicly. And the other suggestion that I had was victim support and services subcommittee, because a lot of times victims who are, or I don't like to use the word victim, survivors who are targeted by hate bias, they generally don't necessarily always understand that there are mechanisms to help them cope and support and thrive after these kind of incidents. And I think maybe if there's a subcommittee that's focused on providing those resources, or at least collecting those resources and like disseminating them, that would be really helpful.
Just a quick question. So one of the subgroups we're looking at is not, the homeless, but you have the homeless, but you don't have the disabled. And many of the homeless are suffering from mental disabilities. And so I'm just wondering if you're thinking of that category at all. And the second thing is I'm also on the Maryland Anti-Hate, Montgomery County Anti-Hate Task Force. And one of the things that issues I had that I have with the task force and that I'm seeing here is this is very reactive, right? So we need to do something more proactive, and I think there ought to be a committee to think about, in the schools, working with the Department of Education and saying we need to get curriculum out there to make sure that, we address this in a systematic manner in the schools, because it does work. We do talk about smoking in the schools. We do talk about, being mean to disabled people, which we don't do in this country anymore. But if you go back 100 years ago, we did do that. And so we do make changes in our schools. And I think we do need to use our schools and, any other forum to try to, and I want to support Mr. Wright here to get ahead of the horse. So reporting it's already too late. And we're only reporting 40%. I really think that this state has to, sort of become a role model, a leader in saying, okay, we're not just reacting, we're actually, taking the bull by the horns, and we have a system set up. One of these committees should be, how do we actually try to make stop this from happening? How do we stop the increase? And all of that other stuff is good, but I think we should have both.
We have disability rights Maryland here.
We do have that. Yeah, no, but I saw what Sam said. Thank you for your comment. But I'm wondering if when we have record keeping, if there's a category where we're keeping records on that.
There's a question.
I'm going to follow up with the NAACP. I want to follow up on her question because the recommendation of having a prevention subcommittee would be significant. Because when we're talking about crimes, the action has already happened. And there should be some understanding of how it generated. And the upstreaming is a way to prevent future incidents.
Let me add something here too. A lot of these points that are raised. Let me preface by saying I'm almost certain that the subcommittees we have will not be what we see up here. It's been a very good conversation because what I'm hearing is there are a lot of considerations that take place in different venues among different populations, right? So whether it's prevention, whether it's identifying who the perpetrators or aggressors are, whether they're white extremists or identifying other groups, the different mediums that are used, whether it's social media or whether it's weapons and things like that, how you report, how you resource, all of those cut through all of these committees here. So we're going to come back, right? We're taking notes. We're going to come back with another set, and we can do it before the next meeting, right? We'll use emails and then folks can comment. And I think what will also be helpful in not only saying, hey, this is what the recommended subcommittees are, but this is what we want each subcommittee to look at, right? Because let's say with the current one, if we stuck with this, and I don't think we will, in schools, we want to, how do you prevent in schools? Among the homeless population, how do you prevent among the homeless population? But I think the other point is very important as well. We're talking about homeless populations. What about the other populations? What about the African American population? What about the Americans with disabilities, Marylanders with disabilities, or a disabled population? So it's a little bit of a siloing here. I don't think there's any subcommittee structure that we could present where it wouldn't seem siloed. So it's going to be important to also outline what we want each subcommittee to look at, and there'll be overlap. Each subcommittee will look at least a core set of factors or issues, and then there may be some things that are unique to individual subcommittees. So you're going to see you'll see a restructure here, or a proposal for a different kind of structure. Yeah. Any other feedback on the the subcommittees and/or things that each subcommittee should be looking at?
Well, you kind of answered. I was going to say something about the homeless subcommittee, about where did that come from? Like, does the report show that a lot of the reporting comes from the homeless population? Like, where is that based on numbers?
Yeah, but when you say it's very low, is that because the way it's reported, the way police report it? Because if a homeless person is targeted for a theft, they steal their stuff or whatever, or assault, it's just a simple assault, but actually that person was targeted because they were on the street, living on the street.
Again, I think a big portion of the sheriff is education.
Yes,
We
with
can't-
law enforcement on how
Yeah.
to classify these crimes.
Yeah.
And part of that is also, and we haven't mentioned it, a lot of incidents are hate speech, and hate speech is protected speech, and as, if we're at a task force or commission in the Attorney General's office, we have to be really careful with First Amendment rights, and a lot of law enforcement, because I do trainings with them, don't necessarily have that distinction. It's not their fault, they just haven't been trained on it. So somebody comes to them, says, this was said to me, I can still be classified as a biased incident, but it's not a crime. And the gut reaction usually that we've been told is it's not a crime, we don't have to do anything with it. And so that sometimes is, and that's to Dave's point, the training.
Now here's the thing with law enforcement, sometimes the crime itself, whether it be a serious assault with a weapon, the hate part is forgotten.
Yes.
The words that were used, I'm going to do this, and we just go with the assault.
Yep. Hate crime charges is a harder thing. Yep.
Question. Claudia Allen, I'm with Yolanda, the Office of Human Rights and Equity. Just a question. I know that in order for a report to be in the state report, it has to go through the police department. But if everyone is saying that various community groups don't feel comfortable reporting to the police, but there are different entities. I know the Howard County Jewish Federation, I know, our office, different offices accept hate bias incident reports. Is it possible that these different entities and organizations that are also accepting hate bias incident reports, those can be counted even if individuals have reported to a separate entity but they haven't reported to the police?
I understand the concept of that, but the goal should be that the community trusts the police enough to report it. Because if we're going away from that, we're going to go away from the protect and serve portion of that. And the reality is a special interest group or a non-law enforcement agency does not have the authority to investigate and do a prosecution in a case. So you want trained investigators to work those cases. So the goal should be that we're building a better understanding of the reporting and the community relationships to get that additional reporting in there. And I do think that's a reportable metrics, to be honest with you. I would anticipate the better we educate, the more the numbers are going to come up, right? To be actually a true reflection of what those numbers are. But again, then we go into this whole thing of everybody's collecting the information differently, and how do you actually analyze, or how do you really report that? But I understand the concept.
So, if I could add a little bit more to what my friends over there mentioned. If there's a way to standardize the reporting within these different entities, that would be in accordance with the guidelines that you set forth through your agency. Just to give you an example, for example, in my organization in the school year, academic year of 2022-2023, we received over 20 reports of school-related issues pertaining to hate bias incidents that occurred in schools. These are incidents that are not going to be reported to police departments. And if there's a way to standardize and create like a template or like certain guidelines for different organizational structures to be able to have the hate crime incidents or hate bias incidents that are being reported to them be included within the reporting, I think that definitely would help to increase and better capture like the prevalence of these incidents within our community, and also satisfy that requirement that they meet like that standard and that burden of proof that these were actual incidents. So a suggestion that I want to put forward, because I feel like policing is something that we struggle with within our communities, there is historically a lot of suspicion and mistrust of law enforcement agencies. I mean, I hate to say it for good reason, right? We know that there's been a lens of scrutiny and suspicion that Muslim communities have exclusively been targeted through. And there is a sense of, if we report this to law enforcement, then this might put a bullseye on me, right? I know the Sikh American community has struggled with that to some degree as well, and many other communities, African American communities as well. And so if we can think outside the box and standardize a way to have reports to these different agencies that are reputable, credible agencies, also be able to be captured within that data, I think that would help. Just a suggestion.
One of the things that, and you hit it on the point, I think one of the things we need to address also is diversity in law enforcement. Law enforcement has been demonized for the last few years pretty badly, and we're steering away different people from law enforcement. And I think we need to look at it and say, how can we bring diversity back into law enforcement? Because law enforcement's not going anywhere, not anytime soon. So we need it, we need to be more diverse.
So we hear a specific piece on next steps that we need to go.
I was gonna say, we will be reorganizing the subcommittees because I agree, they're not gonna look like this. This was a great way to get the conversation started, and y'all have had some wonderful feedback. So we will put that together and share that out at a later date, and then hopefully be able to staff those up after we get them approved.
So with the remaining time, we're going to continue with kind of an open discussion, Q&A of one another, what have you, of us. I have to leave. I'm going to leave you in great hands with Peter Burns, who introduced himself as General Counsel. He's also my designee on the Hate Crimes Commission in my absence. So we're going to kind of give him a test run for the last only the last 15 minutes. But my intent is to attend as many, if not all, of these meetings. This is how important this is. This commission, among the universe of commissions and task force and things like that that the OAG is involved with, this is certainly among the top 3 of the tens of task force and commissions that we do. So I'll turn over to Peter. Before I leave, if anyone has anything for me before I.
I want to get a quick photo before you leave, sir.
Oh, you want to get a quick photo?
The one on that side of the room over here, behind this row.
You want to do it over here?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm trying to avoid the window. Yeah.
All right.
Everyone here can just stay seated. And this side can go stand behind them.
It was front and center.
This works totally. Stay seated right there.
Don't stand up, you will block me.
Zanita.
I won't. Not at all.
You might block me too. Go for it.
What's that?
They don't have a contract. Could you step forward a little bit, please? There's room to just spread out a little bit, so the back row can just be one deep. You're good.
Like it's not hot enough.
You want to give us a countdown?
Let me act like it's not hot.
You'll shoot first, you'll shoot second, so look at my camera first. And 1, 2, 3. I'm gonna take a whole bunch because I'm a terrible photographer. 1, 2, 3.
Whatever. Hold it. Thank you.
One more over here, please. Thank you. 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Hold it up.
Airdrop it.
You didn't do the selfie.
Peter, question I have, when's our next meeting? And are the meetings?
Good question.
And are the meetings gonna continue to be in person or what? I guess that's what I would like to know too.
Jennifer impressed that
I don't believe we currently have a date on the calendar for the next meeting, but as soon as we do, we will get that out to everybody so that you can break it down.
Okay, so
It would be great again, like the last time.
yeah.
So
And is it possible to try to pick a standard kind of time that we
we can have as a recurring on our calendar?
So we will get back to you about scheduling, but thank you for the suggestion. Try to make this as uncomplicated as possible moving forward. So we have another 6 or 7 minutes before we have to wrap up the meeting, and you know, as Attorney General Brown said, time for any open discussion. You have burning ideas that you came to the meeting with today that you really wanted to make sure you put on the table, or any questions or comments that you haven't yet had an opportunity to share. Please.
I'm not a commissioner, but I just wanted to uplift Ms. Sonier's suggestion on healing, and also Zainab also talked about it as well. And I was thinking maybe you could talk about restorative justice. I don't know how that can be brought into the picture, but you know, again, thinking outside the box, thinking about restorative justice, because that's the way that you make change happen instead of just being punitive and, you know, looking for accountability. You're actually making positive change. So I don't know if you were thinking of something along those lines, Ms. Sonia, but you know, something where you were trying to sort of move things forward a bit.
Thank you. So what's on people's minds? Haven't had a chance to share yet. I know this is such a shy and retiring group.
No, I'm really excited. I feel like this was a long time in the making, and I'm so grateful to Zanita and her entire team for all their work in like just getting the legislation forward. And I think the diversity here in this space is really important because it reflects so many different communities who deal with hate bias. And I just can't wait to get to work. You know, I know we all have very busy schedules, and I feel like this is going to be like one of my #1 priorities, just trying to assess and determine and strategize how we can address hate in our state. So,
thank you.
Very glad to be here.
Yeah, and I think I would just give a strong thank you so much, Sam. That's just lovely. I've done a lot of work in prevention in different ways with different schools on the east side, but also I'm aware of other groups that are doing great things in the schools around decreasing hate language, but also mindfulness and things that can bring a different view to the schools. So prevention is something that really taps me and really calls me. And so any way that we can increase the idea of prevention and working with the local communities to stop hate speech and to find a way to communicate better would be, you know, and so if there's some group that's going to work on this, I'm all in. I'm all in on the entire process, but this is something that really calls me right now.
Thank you.
As you're going back and looking at the subcommittees, are people who are not appointed commissioners able to participate in those subcommittees? And I know that's a question that will come up because I know a few entities who are like human rights, human relations related that were coming to meetings before are not part of this commission, but have, you know, valuable information, would love to still be involved. And I know that's a question that's going to come up on the subcommittees. Can people that are not appointed members participate in those subcommittees?
That's a great question. I don't know that we've addressed that yet.
I was going to say, I don't think we have.
Certainly can look into it, and certainly if for some reason we can't involve people in the subcommittee work, I'm sure we can set up opportunities for other community members to participate in our entire process. We have, yes.
Yeah, my name is Joan Bryan. I'm on the Youth and Education Committee and the Policy Committee of the Maryland Commission on LGBTQIA+ affairs. And I'm also on the Baltimore County Human Relations Commission. I'm wondering if there's a way to get contact information for each of the commissioners.
Well, we should be able to provide that.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
One thing, I mean, I think we have an understanding of our different communities and stuff, or we just have a basic understanding. Is it possible that we can educate ourselves? Because we need to hear from different people to understand better, you know, what they're going through, so we can make, you know, more informed decisions.
It's a great idea. Thank you. A lot of nodding heads.
I think going with what the sheriff said, there's a lot of intersectionality. I know we mentioned the shooting in Jacksonville, of Black individuals, a gun had swastikas on it. So I think that there's a lot to talk about the intersectionality of the different hate crimes, and that generally, if you are not a friend to one of us, you're not a friend to all of us. There's not, you know, in terms of hate bias and motivation.
Thank you.
Any other comments from our members of the public who are with us today?
I just have an additional, and I think we've said it in many ways, but we do have to understand that the end result of crime is not a situation that's vacuous. It happens because of certain historical reasons. And, you know, if we really want to do justice to this, we have to dig deeper into the education part of this and do more proactive things in the community, with youth, with reporting. And, you know, I did ask a question whether or not the commission itself would set up a reporting mechanism within the commission, or whereas instead of going through the police department, other allied reporting agents, with the commission itself have some fluidity in terms of responding to data bias, you know, the gateway reasons that we end up with hate crime.
We do have a hate crime hotline.
And we're working on setting up
in the Office of the Attorney General. We're working on setting up an online.
That will be meshed with the commission now.
All that data, you know, we'll share that data, the data we collect with the commission. I mean, Jennifer, do you want anything more to say on that?
I was going to say, since we're working on setting up the online portal, we don't have much information from that one yet, but yeah, we're working on it, and I will be working with that directly, so.
To the sheriff's point, I just wanted to lift up again the upcoming hate bias forum. You know, part of the goal of the hate bias forum, this particular one for September 18th and 19th, 18th is for law enforcement, 19th for the public, really is to hear more from the public and to educate us on the hate crime issues within Howard, Prince George's, and Montgomery County. So again, we do invite all members of this commission, if you can, please register and attend. It will give us the opportunity to hear directly from the community leaders in reference to hate bias, hate crime incidents in those particular locales to continue to educate us. It is the second one. The first one we did was in Western Maryland. I just want to give an uplift to Tiffany from the OAG's office, who played a critical role in helping us plan the first one, especially this second one that it does upcoming, any additional hate bias forums that we do, and as well as Dave and the local HRCs in Howard, Montgomery, and Prince George's County. I also just want to add, I know previously, you know, years ago, when there were hate crime incidents that have happened, there were kind of like a nucleus of organizations that were notified of those incidents to allow those organizations to provide support and response to the victims or survivors of those incidents. So I think that may be an opportunity for us when we think about providing a platform that individuals have trust in providing information. It is critically important that we have some sort of response and support for those individuals to do so. So I think adding some sort of mechanism that allows individuals to have follow-up in reference to any particular verified hate crime incidents, I think will be important as we continue to move forward.
Thank you. I think we have time for maybe one more comment and then have some brief concluding remarks.
A question. Will there be some vehicle, some way that all of us can communicate online or electronically, rather than just having 6 or 7 different email trails running through the group? Has any thought been given to that, like a place for documents to reside, etc.?
We will have to look into that, not at the moment, but we are.
Yeah,
I was going to say, that's a very good question.
I always hate to say it because one meeting.
So for now, it's reply all.
Yeah.
But we will look into that. So, you know, first, thank you. Thanks to all of you, our commissioners, for your service and bringing your time and talent to this important cause. And we obviously have a lot of work to do with one another. I want to thank Tiffany for shepherding the Attorney General's efforts to get us to this point. And to Jennifer, who just started this week, barely on the job, 1 week, quickly grab the baton as Tiffany passed it forward, and that's probably the only sports metaphor you'll ever hear from me. I imagine it's fair to say that the work of this commission is, for many of us, both a professional and a personal interest, if not a calling. We've all had experience bearing witness to hatred. For me, as a Jewish person, and as someone who has been a leader in the disability community for 15 years, I witnessed hatred beyond what I ever would have imagined in the United States, and have committed myself to making a difference. And I'm sure you have too. We each bring to this table experience, lived experience, and identity, and in many cases the intersection of different aspects of identity that are going to really help power this work forward as a commission in the months and years ahead. As we've heard today, we have lots of challenges to address. The rising tide of hate-fueled bias and bullying in school, the inexplicable lack of reporting in some jurisdictions, which may be both a leadership issue as well as a training issue, inconsistent and underreporting in other places. We've got a lot of work to do. So let me thank you again for your participation. Urge you to fill Jennifer's inbox, my inbox, with any thoughts or ideas that you have, anything you think that we should know about, that you know about that's happening in the state, that you think that we should know about and other commissioners should know about. Don't hesitate at all to continue to share with us, and we really look forward to doing this work with you in the months and years ahead. So with that, I will call the meeting officially adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.